hello everyone. I'm just waiting for you all to connect. Some people are still connecting to audio, but you all seem to be extremely competent at having your microphones muted, and we'd love you to keep your cameras on so that we all can see each other, and we are going to have some breakout rooms, or at least one, so that you'll get to do group work together. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to Carol Lewis, who is an amazing colleague of ours at Leap. Carol, so if you could keep yourself muted, that's for the new people joining us, that would be fabulous. So if you don't know how to mute, then you need to go to the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer, and the very bottom left-hand corner, there is a picture of a microphone, and that's where you'll press on that and it will actually mute it. And then you'll see a red line go through it. So Jenny and Leo, I'm not sure if you've got the handle of that one, but if you have a problem, reach out to me in the chat and I can give you more instructions.
I think, Cecily, you as host can mute people, can't you?
Oh, can I? Oh, there we go. Yes, I can. I'll just check then everyone is. Oh, thank you, Carol, for mentoring me. I love that. Okay, again, Carol Lewis is someone I started working closely with in February, and I was so impressed with the way Carol approaches working with people. And I said to her, please, I think our volunteer managers would love to have this information. She said, absolutely, I'd share it with them. So it's taken us a few months to get to this stage, but we're very excited, even through COVID, to be able to offer you this forum. And I'm handing over to Carol now to take off. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Cecily. I've got a really big head now. Thank you for those kind words. And it's lovely to see you all today. I would like to just acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that I'm working on today, and they're the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that everyone here is working on probably a different country and I wouldn't know them all. So thank you for that. And then extend a very warm welcome to you guys. You have such important roles in your organisations and in our communities. And I'm always admire the work that volunteers and volunteer managers do. So I'm not here today to tell you how to do your jobs as volunteer managers or coordinators. You know all of that yourselves. I'm here to give you a little bit of different take on how to engage people. And when we're talking about people here today, we're talking about your volunteers. But this is work that I do generally in my HR practice. So it is a little bit different. So feel free at any time to pop a question in the chat box. I think I have my nice moderator here, Cecily, who will keep an eye on that. Yes. And let me know if there's something that you'll want to ask, or something that I haven't explained quite properly. Now, I'm someone who can get quite excited about what I'm talking about, and I might talk at 1,000,000 miles an hour, I might go off track, etc. So to keep myself steady, because we do have a limited time frame, I do have some notes, so you might see me look down occasionally to check that I'm keeping myself on track. I am also very guilty of trying to cram far too much into one presentation, and I hope I don't do that to you guys today. So as I said, I'm not here to tell you about volunteering or the issues with volunteering or how much importance we place on volunteering in Australia. You know all of that. What I'm here to do today is take a little bit of a different take using neuroscience. And so what I'd like you to come away with today is an understanding of some of our basic neurological functions, and then be able to identify modern day threats at work for your volunteers, also your colleagues, and also this is helpful in your personal life. And then I'd love it if you could come away with a bunch of ideas that you can use to move your volunteers to what we call a reward state. You probably have no idea what I mean by that at the moment, but hopefully by the end of this session, you will. Now, this is to do with neuroscience, and our brains are incredibly fascinating organs in our bodies. And I'd like to start by just doing a quick poll. So I'm going to show you a picture, and Cecily's going to release a poll. And if you could just answer the question in the poll.
So we've had 8 of 11 replies, so I'm assuming that's it. End poll.
So
9 voted. Share results.
Yep. Wow, look at that. So this is about our brain and how we perceive things. So 78% said they saw the white bird first. So looking at that picture now, can you all see both the black and the white bird? Can anyone see the grey birds? Anyone?
Ask in the chat.
That's too hard for me. Where's the chat? It doesn't really matter. There's a chat going already. Here we go. Okay, oops. Sorry. Anyway, there are black, white and grey birds, and it's just interesting that the very same picture can land very differently in people's brains. So I've looked long and hard for these sorts of optical illusions. I had another one up, but it didn't quite work on the big screen. So
Naomi said she couldn't see the grey, and Sri Vicha did, and Jenny and Leo did, and Yvette did. So
can you see my cursor on the screen?
I'm going to get
Can you see that grey bird there, Naomi?
No, I didn't see that one either. That's amazing.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our brains are things that we're still studying them, and today I'm drawing primarily on the work of a guy called Dr. David Rock. He is an Australian, and he started life out being a life coach, and he set up an organization called Results Coaching, and that was incredibly successful back in the day when life coaching became a profession in itself. And he then went into academia and did a PhD in neuroscience before it became a commonly studied subject. And his work is absolutely fascinating. And after he did his PhD, which he did in America, he decided to settle in New York, and he's co-founder and CEO of the Neuro Leadership Institute in New York now. And I keep up to date with a lot of his work. It's absolutely fascinating. And I'm going to share the results of his work with you today, but more importantly, try and make it practical in your day-to-day engagement of your volunteers. Sorry, I've just got to keep clicking the right screen. So first of all, I'd like to explain a couple of our basic neurological functions. So the 2 parts of the brain I'm focusing on today, because there's way too many of them to go through, is the prefrontal cortex, which is this bit of our brain here, and then our limbic system, where the amygdala is located, which is at the back of the brain. So our limbic system is the part of the brain that evolved first. We often call it the primitive brain, or the lizard brain, or the reptile brain. And it's the seat, it's the part of the brain that responds to threats in our daily lives. So way back when, in caveman days, it was an incredibly important part of our brain, and without it, we would never have evolved into the humans we are today. So what happens in the limbic system, in the amygdala, is if you're faced with a threat, such as that saber-toothed tiger or a warring clan, it enabled you to work really, really quickly. So you would either run away as fast as you can or stand and fight. We also may freeze these days. Our modern day threats make us freeze. So when your limbic system is activated, it releases certain hormones into your system that enables you to act instinctively. So things like cortisol and adrenaline. So I want you to have a think now about a time when you felt threatened by something. You might have woken in the night and thought you heard a prowler or something like that. What happens to your body? Use the chat line to tell me what some of the physiological responses are to when you feel scared. You got anything there, Cecily?
I've got dressing up, freezing up makes your body freezes, dressing up, clenching body, frozen.
Yeah. So I've got a boy in year 12 at the moment, so not a great year to be doing the HSC. So the kind of pre-exam nerves are even worse than normal. Can you remember what it was like at school going into an exam? What sort of feelings you had? Remember that expression, we've got butterflies in your tummy, you get that nervous tummy. The other things that can happen to us when our limbic system is activated is we might sweat a little bit more, our breathing gets shallow, we get, some people go red in the face. So there's all these physiological signs that your limbic system has been activated. And the reason that you feel it in your body is your brain, when your limbic system is working, is your brain sends its resources from it to your body. So your blood supply and your oxygen goes primarily to your body. And sometimes if you have a feeling of, you're in a bit of an argument with someone, and usually that's a threat situation. So your limbic system is working, and you might say to yourself afterwards, those words just came out of my mouth. I don't know what I was thinking. And guess what? You weren't thinking, because you were using your limbic system. So our prefrontal cortex is like our executive function. It enables us to integrate emotion and logic, whereas the limbic system only allows us to work on emotion. And so when we are doing our best work, we are using our prefrontal cortex. It's often called the CEO of our brains, because it is where we do our decision making, where we do our problem solving, and those higher level cognitive functions. So that's a little bit about the brain, and you'll see in a moment why I'm telling you all of this stuff. So this is a little picture before we move on of a brain in threat and a brain that is calm. So you can see that big red thing in the middle. It's lighting up the limbic system there. So I want you to think about that sort of brain. Which sort of brain would you like to be operating with most of the time, in your threat state or in a calm state? So what David Rock did is, when MRI technology came about and was used mostly for medical purposes, he decided to take this technology and see what happens in our brains in our everyday working lives. So he's very much a management consultant as well. So he's really interested in human behavior in the workplace. And so he came up with a series of scenarios for the people he was studying, just things that happen every day at work, and decided to see what happened in their brains. And he found that when our brains are threatened at work, they actually look almost exactly like a brain that is facing a major threat, like there's a fire or there's a burglar or something. So even the mildest things at work can trigger our limbic system. And what he did is he put these threats, he classified these threats and came up with what he calls his SCARF model. So he's classified the threats into 5 domains, and the domains are here on the screen: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So they sound all kind of pretty bland, but you trigger one of these threats in someone's brain and it lights up like that again. So very interesting. So let's have a look at what these threats actually mean. So status is our relative importance to other people. So we like to know where we are in the pecking order, and generally we don't like it when we are lower in the pecking order than other people. So brain science tells us that when you experience a drop in status, your brain lights up, like I showed you on that previous screen, and it lights up in the same way as we experience physical pain. So an increase in status will activate a reward response to you, which means you're activating your feel-good hormones like dopamine and serotonin. So status can be threatened in the workplace really quite easily. So if you walk into a meeting room, for example, and you greet everyone except one person, the one person you ignore is going to have a threat to their status because you haven't felt that they're important enough to give the time of day to. So other sort of situations every day at work create a threat response. The classic one at the moment, particularly in COVID, is the dreaded annual performance review. That process is inherently status threatening because you are being evaluated and judged by your boss. Even giving constructive feedback can set off a threat response in someone. In our everyday lives, the one that I always come back to, which because it's so Sydney, is if you're driving along and someone cuts in front of you or doesn't let you in if you're trying to change lanes, you know, my immediate response often is, oh my God, who do they think they are? That's because they think, you know, they're more important than me and driving along in their posher car or whatever. But there's a gazillion instances in everyday life where your status can be threatened, and it releases that little bit of cortisol and adrenaline into your system. So certainty, this domain is about our ability to predict the future. And when people can't predict what's going to happen to them, they get a threat response. So they release the cortisol and adrenaline. So ambiguity is a trigger, is a threat trigger. And the brain is, David Rock calls our brain a certainty creating machine because it's always trying to predict the future. So for example, at work, when we provide really clear expectations for people, when we communicate clearly, when we let them know what needs to be done, you're creating more of a reward state than a threat state. I think most of us would agree that if we're doing a job, whether we're a volunteer or a paid worker, if we're not actually sure what we're supposed to be doing, not actually sure what the boss expects, we're not doing our best work. So autonomy. Who likes being micromanaged here? Micromanaging is the classic threat to your autonomy. And, you know, if you've got someone looking over your shoulder or telling you what to do every minute of the day, that person is triggering your limbic system and releasing cortisol and adrenaline into you. It's the classic removal of autonomy. So we like having a feeling that we have a choice, that we are able to make choices. So at work, it might be around having some control, how we schedule our day, how we actually carry out certain tasks, all that sort of stuff. I've made a note here, and I am just going to look at my notes because I want to quote it correctly, but way back in 1977, a couple of academics, Judith Rodin and Ellen Langer, did a study of nursing homes, and they found that residents who were provided with autonomy, like choosing what they had for dinner or choosing when they got up out of bed in the morning, they lived longer and were healthier than residents who had no autonomy or choice. And part of this is because when we live in a chronically threatened state, we have chronic levels of cortisol in us. So it's not healthy. It leads to long-term health issues. Okay, I'm going to move to relatedness. Our brains are hardwired to scan the world and to assess whether someone is a friend or a foe. And we have a bias to classify everyone as a foe because it keeps us safe. So relatedness is the feeling of being safe with other people. There's a lot of work these days around psychological safety at work, and it's related to the, no pun intended, is connected with this feeling of relatedness. We all want to belong at work, and when we're working with people where we don't feel a sense of connection, or we don't feel that we are welcomed, then we are releasing cortisol and adrenaline into people's systems. You know, in the pre-COVID era, even just shaking somebody's hand warmly and genuinely, we can create a reward response and release dopamine rather than cortisol. So at the moment, I think we actually have to work harder on relatedness because we're all in semi-isolation. And the last domain is fairness. And this is the perception of fair exchanges between people, right? So we all want to know that we've got our fair share of everything. I don't know about you guys, but growing up with a bunch of siblings, we're kind of hardwired to get our fair share of everything. You know, we argue over who's had how many chocolate biscuits. We argue whose turn it is to do the washing up. So from a very early age, we are geared to get our fair share of things and do our fair share of the work rather than less. And so you can see at work, there are a huge number of implications when people are not treated fairly. And quite a lot of my work is around what I call organizational justice, which is making sure that there's fairness and transparency in how organizations operate, even through its policies and procedures. Now, I'm going to stop being a motor mouth for a second and just see if anybody's got any questions about this model. I'm just going to try and check the chat line.
No, there's none yet. I think everyone's just thoroughly enjoying listening to you.
I hope I'm not confusing everyone.
No, you have not.
I have put an extra slide in this presentation because one of the things I think we need to...
Sorry, Carol. There's just one word come in, said trust with a question mark. Where does that fit, trust?
That's in relatedness and fairness.
And someone else has written, no, it is so interesting. Thank you. So there you go.
Yeah. So I've put this extra slide in to this presentation because the impact of this pandemic is immense on people's feelings of all sorts of things. So we know we've seen a spike in mental health issues, from the mildest of anxiety to people really suffering from depression now. And my view is that we are feeling more threatened than most of us have in our lives. Maybe some of us have had, you know, lived in different places where threats are more current, but, you know, certainly in Australian society, we haven't had a major war, we haven't had a recession since the 90s. And so there's a whole lot of new threats that we're facing for the first time. And when you understand that when we're in a threatened state, our limbic system could be working in overdrive and we are releasing all these unhealthy hormones into our bodies. So when you think about status, there are so many people out there now who've lost their job or their jobs are at risk. And that is creating a massive threat response for them. I don't know about you guys, but personally, I've been saying to myself, when is this going to end? Every time you think it's going to be sort of going back to semi-normal, we get another hot spot. So that dealing with the kind of the unending uncertainty at the moment is really difficult for many of us. And autonomy, you know, since March, we haven't been able to do what we want, when we want, how we want. We just can't do it. And we don't know when we'll be able to have that autonomy back. Relatedness is hitting a lot of people badly. People, you know, they're in isolation, and you're hearing all these stories coming out of Melbourne with people really struggling that they, you know, haven't been able to go out and see people. They can only go within a 5 kilometre radius, etc. And I feel most keenly for those people who have relatives in aged care facilities that they can't visit, and you know, people who can't attend family events. I went to my first funeral on Friday, and it was, you know, it was just not the same. You can't, you know, you don't have that face-to-face ability to comfort people. So I think relatedness is something that a lot of people are struggling with. And of course, there's the whole thing about fairness. If anybody knows people who've lost their jobs, or, you know, family life has been turned upside down, or they've got COVID, or, you know, a relative has passed away from COVID, there's a massive sense of fairness here. Yeah, so thought that's some context that we need to think about when we're engaging with each other and with our volunteers at the moment. Okay, so there's a thing that in neuroscience circles that we call the threat reward axis. So I look at it like this, if you can see me. If we tip people into a threat state, we do this, right? And the lower we go down, the worse we perform and the worse we feel. So what we want to do is keep the threats on an even keel and up the rewards, so that when we up the reward state, we get those feel-good hormones, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all of those neurotransmitters that are so important for our cognitive and emotional health. The thing that I did want to also mention is that it is easier to create a threat state for someone than it is a reward state. You can unintentionally create a threat state. So we need to be very mindful of how we go about engaging with people. And I'm going to have a little bit of a brainstorm with you on that in a minute. But I want to put this in a little bit of further context. So I'm yabbering on about all this stuff. Why does it matter? Well, it matters hugely because when we are in a threat state, we actually don't perform very well. The research is really clear about our ability to collaborate, be creative, make good decisions, and you know, all of that kind of stuff that you need in a high-performing team, whether it's a voluntary team or a paid team. And you know, the way I remember it is that when people are in a threat state, they're on their guard, so they simply can't work properly. They're so focused on protecting themselves from these threats. And someone asked about trust a little bit earlier. Well, when people are working in an environment where the threats are apparent, there is an automatic reduction in trust and an increase in hostility, and people can become unhealthily competitive. So if you can create a reward state for your volunteers, these are the type of behaviours you're far more likely to see. Creativity, openness to new ideas. People are able to collaborate more and work as a team because they trust each other. They're more engaged. Their productivity is higher. Their decisions are better. So, you know, a reward state is what we call neurosafe. And then we work far more effectively. We can work to our potential. So I'm going to read a little piece from David Rock from an article that he wrote. He said in this article, imagine a manager who does these things, shows you what is great about yourself, thereby increasing your status, who provides really clear expectations, increasing your certainty, who lets you make decisions, increasing your autonomy, who trusts you, and there is a human bond between you and your manager. So that's relatedness. And what if they treat you fairly? That increases your sense of fairness. So all of these simple things will put you in a reward state. And David Rock says, when people are in a reward state, people are literally smarter, more effective, more engaged, and more productive in the workplace. So imagine if you could do that for your volunteers. So I want to have a look about how we could do that. Actually, this is what I was talking about before. Threats can be triggered unintentionally. So we need to be really intentional about creating a reward state. And simple things like for status, if, you know, I talked about if you walk into a room and you say hello to everyone except one person, it may be that you didn't actually intend to ignore them, but the impact of that unintentional ignoring them is immense. You can look at someone in the wrong way and they go, oh, who does she think she is? And their status is threatened. You guys know a lot about volunteer motivation and why people volunteer, etc. And it is a completely different set of motivators to paid staff. So what we do know is that it's the intrinsic motivators that generally will work for a volunteer. So I'd like to use the analogy of wrapping your volunteers up in a scarf model, it's like pun intended. And what you can and how you can use the David Rock's model to understand how behaviours drive that reward state so that you get the best out of your volunteers. So I think there's a whole lot of simple day-to-day actions and words that can keep your volunteers moving towards a reward state and away from threat. And I'd love us to have a bit of discussion using the model of how we could do that. And then I'll share my ideas with you. So you can either go off mute and talk or pop your thoughts into the chat function. Don't all talk at once. Jed, you want to say something? Or you just touching your screen? He's checking Facebook while he's listening to me. Okay, using people's names, Elizabeth, that's absolutely, that's so personal. Okay, so how could you make a volunteer feel rewarded for their status? Ownership of a project, thanks, Jed. That's, yeah, so which one is that? That's autonomy, right? Acknowledging worthwhile actions, that's relatedness, Jenny. Making everyone feel important and included by recognizing their special talents and skills. Terrific, Maggie. That's Yvette. You're all typing so fast I can't keep up now. That's what you're doing is rewarding their status. Maggie, showing interest in them personally, getting to know them. Yep, that's rewarding relatedness. Luke, constant communication about what's going on. Yep, what's going to happen, certainty. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to share with you some ideas that I had and put together. I'm going to have to look at the screen because I can't remember all of them and I haven't printed it out. Okay, so we often hear that our volunteers are really important and, you know, a valuable asset and all that kind of stuff. But I've often heard volunteers themselves, as well as some paid workers, going, oh, I'm just a volunteer, or she's just a volunteer. That is not rewarding their status as a volunteer. So actually having authentic respect. I've also heard people in paid workers saying things like, oh, let's just get a volunteer to do that, as if the work is unimportant. I mean, if it's important enough to get someone in to do it, it's important work. So that building that authentic respect for your volunteers from paid workers, so important. Status, you know, a lot of volunteers come with a huge number of skills and life experience. So asking them for their ideas and asking them for feedback on you as a volunteer engagement person or on your organization. And, you know, simple thing, you know, the more extrinsic things that like providing letters of service and other kind of badges to indicate their contribution. With certainty, as Luke said, clarity of what's going on, clarity of work expectations, clear processes. You know, the most paid workers would say that as well. Regular feedback, because if they know that they're doing a good job and what they're doing is that they're going about things the correct way, that will improve certainty. And if you're asking a volunteer to do a big project, chunking it down so they know where to start. Autonomy, choices to how tasks are completed, giving people challenges and problems to solve. You know, my experience also, a lot of volunteers get to do all the donkey work, and that's not really rewarding their status or their autonomy. and the opportunity to use their current skills and the opportunity to learn new skills. I've put a load of things in relatedness. I think there's something about being available and accessible, right? You're important enough to be able to pick up the phone and call me when you need to. Treating them really as part of the team. I found that both paid workers, program participants and volunteers love merchandise. You know, if they got the mug with the logo on it, they got the t-shirt, that kind of stuff. If they can buddy up with paid staff, that's a great way to drive relatedness. Personal thank yous, remember their birthdays, get them a free cuppa and a piece of cake. All of that stuff is building that sense of relatedness. For me, the big one on fairness is giving your volunteers adequate training. So not just, you know, throwing them in the deep end, yeah, just go and sit at the reception desk and answer the phone. Really investing in giving them good training, because then they can use their skills. It's a much fairer process. Giving them regular feedback, being consistent with your expectations, absence of favoritism, you know, don't overtly favour your paid staff, and don't have your favourite volunteers who get all the good jobs, and recognition for their contribution, which is something you guys said before. So now the hard bit comes of this session. I'd like you to look at your current recruitment process and come up with some ideas of how to turn it into a neurosafe experience for your volunteers. So I'd like you to go through each of the 5 domains again and go, what is it about my recruitment process at the moment that could reward people on each of these domains? It's pretty hard, and we're going to pop you into breakout groups. And what I'd like each breakout group to do, see how many ideas you can come up with in 5 minutes, and nominate a spokesperson, and we'll share our ideas together. So it's Cecily, can you weave your magic with the breakout rooms? You're on mute, I can't hear a word you're saying.
I will do the breakout rooms, but can you write the question in the chat so everyone can see that?
Yes.
Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm not sure who was in which breakout room, because I think we did them randomly, but could I ask the first person in one of the groups just to give us their ideas on a neurosafe recruitment process?
Beck, do you want to talk for us? Because we didn't decide who was going to be the speaker.
We had, we acknowledged a few parts of the process that were really important. So at the very end, we were talking about acknowledging volunteers for the contribution they make. I think we get stuck on this low budget, therefore we can't acknowledge. But Carol, something you said that stuck to me was the intrinsic versus the extrinsic. And the intrinsic is more valuable. So looking at ways that we can acknowledge people that actually don't cost any money. And then the other thing that we were talking about a little bit was volunteer onboarding and training. At times we miss certain things because we don't think they're as important, such as introduction to the cause and connecting people to the reasons why they started volunteering. So I guess that's a bit of what we were talking about.
Terrific. So acknowledging, and then, yeah, I'm with you on the importance of onboarding and training. Yeah. Next group.
In our group, we mentioned about managing clear expectations, also clearly defining the role as well, and then matching the skills with the role so that
yeah. Terrific. Yep. So clear expectations and clearly defining the role. That's around the certainty reward, and matching skills. That's probably around status, that you're recognizing the skills that they're bringing. Okay. The next group. Was there another group? I have to confess that the group I was in, we didn't do any work, we just talked.
Oh! There were 2 other groups. So your group then is eliminated, and then there's another group. There was Elizabeth in a group with I can't remember who Elizabeth was with. Come on, we need some.
We had our group, Luke and Jenny, and Luke has the most experience with recruiting volunteers still during COVID. In regards to my program, we're not recruiting any volunteers, even though we're a volunteer centre within the organisation. It's more about making the certainty that there will be an opportunity for them to come back, and we've created Zoom get-togethers, and they're still going to be recognised for New South Wales Volunteer of the Year awards, and personal calls, getting each buddy system in over the phone now, where they can talk to each other, and also try and do some professional development, forwarding stuff for them, which can help them with their programs, and interests as well. So it's upskilling them while they can't actually come into the centre at the moment.
I think COVID has been absolutely terrible, but there's so many things we actually, I like that. Oh, sweet.
Oh.
With so many things that we've had to learn, we've had to be more creative about things. So I've got some ideas. These are my ideas for turning your recruitment process into an experience. And I use those words quite deliberately because we very often talk about process, systems, procedures, policies, but we forget that particularly with something like recruitment, this is an experience that somebody's having of your organisation, and you want it to be a really positive and safe experience. So I think if you take a professional yet friendly approach, that signals that your status is important. You're as important as a paid worker for this process to be professional. Sell the importance of volunteers in your recruitment advertisements. Things like consider whether you really need to ask for referee details at application stage. You want to say you're important enough that we just want to meet you first before checking everything out. Respond to inquiries quickly, and if you are giving interviews, be organised on time and thank the volunteer for giving their time at interview. So the certainty, I think, having a clear documented recruitment process so they know what to expect, clear timeframes for your application process and potential start dates. If we're doing face-to-face interviews, make sure they know where to park and where to go. Make sure they know who's on the panel. If you're interviewing by Zoom, that creates anxiety anyway. So just make sure you're very clear about that up front and how to use the technology. For autonomy, I thought that building in some choice for your volunteers, if possible, sometimes allowing them to do their own matching, and provide opportunities during the process for the volunteer to ask you questions. I'm rushing a bit because I'm aware it's 10 to 1. Relatedness, make this process simple, use your best professional self, and keep the interviews informal, but make a big effort to put people at ease, especially online. And if there's a group interview, be intentional with introductions and warm-up activities. And then the fairness is around clear requirements, sufficient opportunity for the volunteer to sell themselves to you. Let the volunteer do most of the talking during an interview. It's really, it's not great when, as the interviewer, you're rabbiting on too much. And if your volunteer is unsuccessful, give clear and useful feedback to them. That's a fair thing to do. So I went and had a little bit of a Google at job ads for volunteers, and I didn't find many that I thought were terrific. A lot of them were very boring and very much talking about what the organisation needed rather than emphasising the volunteer. But I liked this one. So it really talked about, the difference you can make as a volunteer. You're absolutely worth your weight in gold. Some lovely language there. So that is rewarding their status before they've even picked up the phone or put an application in. And then, the work perks, the good stuff. I thought that was a lovely way to put it. But what it's saying here is we know that you're important, and these are all the things that we can do for you. This is what you're going to get out of it. And I really love that last line in this job ad. If you're motivated to contribute positively to your community, then we would love to hear from you. This is warm. It's, you know, it's got a lot of relatedness in there. It's got a lot of status in there. So I love this quote, which I'm going to finish with, and then we might have a few minutes for questions if you've got any. People will never forget how you made them feel. If you've made them feel safe, they will remember that. If you've made them feel unimportant to your organisation, they will remember that. So now you know a little bit more about how our brain works. You can understand why the experience is important. So thank you very much. That's it.
Now, if you'd like to unmute yourself and just indicate that you'd like to ask a question, it'd be great to hear you actually speak rather than just have to sit there and look. But yeah, open to you. Yes, Jen.
Were we supposed to be able to see that ad? I
No.
couldn't see it.
No, you weren't meant to.
Okay.
Any other questions?
You didn't see the ad?
Oh, you're
No.
not sharing your screen anymore. We've just got everyone up. Oh.
Why is that dropped off?
Oh, maybe when we went out to the breakout rooms, you need to
Ah.
share the screen again.
Oh, sorry. Is it sharing now?
Yes.
Yeah, it's sharing now. Maybe you can just go back one.
Sorry, you must have thought I was completely mad talking about.
No, I knew what was going on. That's all right.
I didn't think.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good.
And I don't know, Cecily, are you going to make these slides available to people?
Yes. I've actually already told them that we're going to have a handout, but I will talk to you about that afterwards, Carol, because I keep forgetting to talk to you about that.
Yeah, that's fine, because I was reading off this slide, but
yeah, no, I was
you
just
must
like,
have thought I was mad. But there you go, you can get those notes.
it's nice to listen sometimes, Carol, and not actually be looking as well. So I didn't have a problem with any of that. But it's a beautiful picture of Maya and Angela. Is that how you say her name?
Maya Angelou.
Angelou, yeah, beautiful.
Magnificent human being she was.
Yes.
Thank you for the feedback, Luke and Yvette.
Yes, and I just want to say, Carol, this has been extraordinary. You have given us another, there's quite a few of those messages I've heard about from different volunteer managers, things I've attended, but I think putting it in that context gives it so much logic, and it gives you a structure to make sure that you've got all your bases covered. And that's what I love about this. I thought it was just amazing. And you know how if you all look at the bottom of your screen, you've got a reactions thing? Let's give Carol an applause or a thumbs up, everyone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
It's been awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Lovely to meet you all, meet you all as we do in Zoom in COVID days, and keep safe, everyone.
So Naomi says, can't wait to use this knowledge moving forward. Thanks, Carol. Shri Vicha says, thanks so much, Carol and Cecily. Maggie says, you have been awesome, Carol. Are there any websites that we can go to improve your skills? So let's try and put that in a handout as well. Yes. Jenny says, thank you. Yvette says, lovely discussion, very helpful. So like all of you, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for staying here with us, and thank you for wanting to take this and apply it to your roles, because only all together will we make our volunteers have a better experience, so they'll want to keep volunteering, and hopefully not just with your organisation, but many organisations, because I do think the more we share volunteers, the more valued and rewarded they are, the more that they will continue to contribute. So have a fabulous day, and look forward to seeing you next time.